Rabbi Harold Kushner, author of When Bad Things Happen to Good People, reflects the point of our interlude video earlier. He says, when you carry out acts of kindness, you get a wonderful feeling inside. It is as though something inside your body responds and says, yes, this is how I ought to feel. So if being kind makes us feel good, why are we so often unkind? Why do those sharp words come out of our mouths as we speak to our spouse, our child, our friend, even ourselves? Why, when some organization we belong to asks if we can send a few postcards to people whose voting rights can be restored, or if we could help once in a while with the club for young adults with intellectual disabilities, or if we can fill in the blank, we don't even think about saying yes. Why do we not take a moment or two to play with the dog, even as the dog keeps dropping a tennis ball in our lap? Kindness does not require huge commitments. Some kindnesses take under 5 minutes. Others may take a couple hours. But most kindnesses do not require us to give up years of our lives. Kindness is not hard. Why then is it not more abundant? And philosophers and religious leaders agree kindness is everything. The Tibetan Buddhist Dalai Lama says of his religion, "My religion is very simple. My religion is kindness." The fabled Chinese philosopher of the 6th century before the Common Era, Lao Tzu, wrote, "Kindness in words creates confidence. Kindness in thinking creates profoundness. Kindness in giving creates love." And the 20th century Albanian Indian Roman Catholic nun, Mother Teresa, said, "I would rather make mistakes in kindness and compassion than work miracles in unkindness and hardness." All of the major world religions have some version of the Golden Rule. The 20th century American illustrator Norman Rockwell collected versions from various sources. From Buddhism, hurt not others with that which pains yourself, from the Udana Varga. From Christianity, all things whatsoever you would that others do to you, do you even so to them, for this is the law and the prophets, from the Gospel of Matthew. From Confucianism, is there any one maxim which ought to be acted upon throughout one's whole life? Surely the maxim of loving kindness is such, "Do not unto others what you would not they should do unto you," from the Analects. From Judaism, what is hurtful to yourself, do not do to another. That is the whole of the Torah, and the remainder is but commentary. Go and learn it. From the Talmud. From Islam, no one of you is a believer until one loves for one sibling what one loves for oneself, from traditions. From Jainism, in happiness and suffering, in joy and grief, we should regard all creatures as we regard our own self, and should therefore refrain from inflicting upon others such injury as would appear undesirable to us if inflicted upon ourselves, from the Yoga Shastra. From Sikhism, as you deemest thyself, so deem others, then shalt thou become a partner in heaven, from the poet Kabir. From Taoism, regard your neighbor's gain as your own gain, and regard your neighbor's loss as your own loss, from the Tai Shang Kan Yin Pian. And from Zoroastrianism, That nature only is good when it shall not do unto another whatever is not good for its own self. From the Dadistan Edenic. Rockwell ended this collection with a quote from the 20th century American poet Edwin Markham. "We have committed the golden rule to memory. Let us now commit it to life." So just how do we commit the golden rule to life? How do we commit to kindness? As with everything else in life, we need to practice. The Buddhists have a meditation practice just for working on strengthening kindness. It is metta meditation. We just sang a version of the practice in our first hymn this morning, filled with loving kindness. The Buddhist website, The Lion's Roar, has a page titled Metta Meditation, a complete guide to loving kindness. I have some skepticism about complete, but a guide to loving kindness. On the page, we are told that metta meditation, or loving kindness meditation, is a Buddhist practice for cultivating compassion for ourselves and others through directing loving, friendly phrases and goodwill. The word metta is a Pali word, most often translated as loving kindness, but has also been translated as universal goodwill or loving friendliness. The practice originates from the historical Buddha's early discourse on immeasurable friendliness, the Metta Sutta. Through metta, we become more honest and loving toward ourselves and the world around us. In metta meditation, we wish happiness, safety, and ease toward ourselves and others. In the most common version of metta practice, we offer these feelings of goodwill through the use of simple phrases, first to ourselves, and in succession to someone we love, someone we're indifferent towards, someone we consider a difficult person, and finally to all beings everywhere. This allows us to begin our loving kindness practice with feelings most accessible to us and work up to more difficult feelings, such as sending love to someone we have a negative relationship with. As Buddhist teacher Melvin Escobar writes in his teaching on metta meditation, the practice of metta can be compared to lifting weights. If we begin with a weight that's too heavy for us, we might end up hurt, or we might give up. Therefore, we begin the practice of metta incrementally, starting with ourselves, a being we consider beloved, such as a mentor, child, or pet. And when we're ready, we work up to a more difficult person. With practice, the benefits of metta can be transformative. It is suggested we begin by directing loving kindness to ourselves. That can sometimes be more difficult than directing it toward others. How often do you beat yourself up for something you would lovingly understand in a friend? If you once say something to a friend, don't say it to or about yourself. Turn that golden rule around occasionally. Do not treat yourself as you would not treat another. Practicing metta meditation may help us cultivate kind thoughts, but it should also help us act upon those thoughts. As the 20th century Lebanese American poet Khalil Gibran noted, the smallest act of kindness is worth more than the greatest intention. Still, the intention must come first. Our Unitarian Universalists forebears, the Transcendentalists, believed in doing something they called self-culture. I keep saying cultivate kindness. That's exactly where they were going. Tend to your own self as you would your garden. Cultivate the plants you want, eradicate the weeds. In his essay titled The Roots of Unitarian Universalist Spirituality in New England Transcendentalism, Dr. Barry Andrews writes, articulated most eloquently by William Ellery Channing, the notion of self-culture held that the goal of the religious life was the culture or cultivation of one's inner spiritual nature. As Channing described it in his address on self-culture, to cultivate anything, be it a plant, an animal, a mind, is to make grow. Growth, expansion is the end. Nothing admits culture but that which has a principle of life, capable of being expanded. The one, therefore, who does what one can to unfold all one's powers of capacities, especially one's nobler ones, so as to become a well-proportioned, vigorous, excellent, happy being, practices self-culture. Quite apart from the way the word is understood today, culture in Channing's time still had primarily horticultural associations, in keeping with an agrarian economy and outlook, and in contrast to the more narrowly psychological concept of the self that sometimes we have now, self was then essentially equated with one's spirit or soul. Very simply, self-culture means spiritual growth. Self-culture introduced a developmental or progressive view of the spiritual life, replacing the notion of conversion as a one-time decisive event with that of religious growth as an ongoing process. However, just as the potential for spiritual growth is limitless, a correspondingly endless self-discipline is necessary to achieve it. Moreover, this self-discipline required that inward spiritual aspirations be manifested in outward ethical behavior. Back to Gibran, a small act of kindness is worth more than the greatest intention toward it. We can grow our capacity for kindness. Andrews says that the transcendentalists used several practices as spiritual disciplines: contemplation, being in nature, reading, conversation, and journaling. Those practices were their way of cultivating spiritual growth, and they expected to see that growth in their living. Sometimes the transcendentalists were criticized for being too focused on the individual. But Andrews notes that the transcendentalists were singly and as a group more active in social and political reforms than their Unitarian opponents and critics. The ethical consequences of their transcendentalist ideals impelled them into a wide variety of causes and reforms. The educational reforms of Bronson Alcott and Elizabeth Peabody, the Christian socialism of William Henry Channing, Margaret Fuller's feminism and involvement in the Roman Revolution of 1848, Thoreau's civil disobedience, George Ripley's Brook Farm, abolitionism and women's rights. These were not accidents or deviations, but logical consequences of the transcendentalist social ethic. They were the inevitable outcome of a belief in a common human nature and the desire to integrate spiritual aspirations and moral behavior. Transcendentalism, for all its emphasis on spirituality, led its adherents into the world more often than away from it. Andrews writes that Emerson insisted that the individual cannot be understood in isolation. Human nature is relational. Every being in nature has its existence so connected with other beings that if set apart from them, it would instantly perish. We cannot grow or unfold apart from community. As he wrote in an early poem, each and all are needed by each one. Nothing is fair or good alone. Thus, if reform begins with the individual, it does not or should not end there. believing they were possessed of one universal mind common to all. They subscribed to Kant's categorical imperative to act in such a way as to believe that what is right and true for oneself is right and true for others also. And so we come back to the golden rule. Be kind and do what you can to strengthen your capacity for kindness. May we be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be peaceful and at ease. May we be whole. Blessed be.